Hey, it's Amir Borman, and this is another episode of the Talent Tango podcast. And on this week, we have Suzie Anthony from SessionM. So Suzie is the VP of Culture and People. She is at SessionM, where they make an awesome workplace by combining culture, innovation, leadership, and inclusiveness. She drives the overall people strategy and loves spending time with SessionM-ers to keep her finger on the pulse within the organization. She brings with her more than 10 years of global HR experience at rapidly growing technology companies, focused on empowering people and delivering exceptional business results. Most recently, she built the people and culture function at Flywire, a fintech payments company in Boston, Massachusetts. Prior to Flywire, Suzie held HR leadership roles at Core Security and ZMags. Suzie graduated from Simmons College with a BA in Marketing Communications and a minor in Psychology. Thanks for being on this week, Suzie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on. I think before I had a couple of reads of that, I got it through it, but we're going to be rocking and rolling now. So appreciate your time. So as I like to start this podcast, I always like to get a little bit of overview, the origin story of how you got into this field that is talent acquisition, and let you run with that.
Sure. I think like a lot of college grads these days, I did not have any idea what I wanted to do. I focused on marketing and communications in college, and after college realized pretty quickly that wasn't where I wanted to focus my time and energy. And, started out on the administrative side of the house, running internship programs and onboarding and all that great stuff for a PR and government relations firm here in Boston. From that, realized very quickly I loved the people space. I loved interacting with people. I loved driving great engagement and experiences. And from that, continued to look for opportunities where I could grow and develop in that area. So from there, I moved to another company and continued to just get experience. From there, I moved to, more hiring and benefits administration. And then after that, I actually landed in my first startup. And it was a wild and crazy ride, but it was a ton of fun. And over a very short period of time, we grew the company, over 100% from an employee headcount perspective. And I really cut my teeth in all things HR. And from then on, it was like, I love tech. I love the space. I love the speed. And it's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. So you actually then got into this space. You went from big to small. Do you think you'd ever go back and away from startups, or is the speed, the pace at which they move, is that just too alluring now?
I do love the speed. I do love smaller organizations, small to medium-sized organizations. So you never know, but I would say this right now is my sweet spot in terms of growing and scaling an organization.
So when you started at SessionM, just to give us a little bit of context, how big were they? And in terms of headcount, like how big are you guys now?
When I started about 18 months ago, we were probably about 160 people worldwide. We're close to 230 today.
Wow.
So we've had a pretty significant growth over the last couple of months.
Wow, that is pretty big. So at SessionM, you guys experienced some massive growth. How many people are you responsible for now?
I have a team of 5, and most of those people are focused on talent acquisition. I have a head of talent. So, when I got here, there wasn't any function for people and culture. So I've really grown it from the bottom up. I've hired every person on the team. My first hire was talent acquisition. It was like I knew we were going to be growing and growing quickly. We were using an agency, or many agencies actually, and I knew that we could control a lot more of brands and really improve by bringing that all in-house. So I started by hiring our director of talent acquisition, who was actually working with us in an RPO model. He just impressed me from the moment that I met him and talked to him. And he joined us about a year ago full time. And then from there, we could quickly realize that wasn't going to be sustainable given the number of open recs and headcount that we were going after. So we hired another recruiter here in Boston. And then we've been focused on growing and building out a brand new office in Prague, which is really a development hub for us. So we hired a talent acquisition person there, and she started earlier this year. And then in addition, we have an intern that's with us for the summer.
Nice. Are you going to get to take trips to Prague to visit quite often then?
Oh, yeah. That is going in September. And then I will go at some point later this fall.
Good for you. That's a good excuse to get out there and work, obviously. But yeah. I know we were talking about high efficiency, lean teams delivering value. I do like always to set a little context to define things because I want to make sure everyone understands the context. When you are looking at value from what your team is providing, what are the highest target value items that you guys are delivering to the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think we stop and ask ourselves pretty frequently, like, how are we spending our time? And is this the most valuable thing that we can be doing? And very quickly it was like, well, hey, why are we spending all this time doing coordination of, phone interviews and, interviewing and scheduling it's massive and it's important and getting it right is important. But there are so many tools out there today. How can we utilize tools to make us more efficient and for us to really drive that on-site candidate experience, making sure that we're there in person? That to me is more important than scheduling a phone screen. That's important, but we now use a scheduler where candidates, we send them a link and they can schedule time with our recruiters directly for that first phone interview. So it sort of takes that piece off of the team. They don't have to worry about that.
And just curious, so to get something like that approved, because I know, every organization has different process. Was that purely driven through talent, or, where did that approval come from?
Yeah, great question. So with all of the tools that we have, this is actually a very inexpensive one. It's like under $30 a month for us to have this scheduling tool. A lot of companies have them. There's a lot of different flavors out there. So we found one that we like and it's been working really well for us. We also spent a little bit of time trying to find, there are some really amazing AI schedulers out there that they're like an email and they can schedule, with Google Gmail, they can schedule interviews across the organization. We tried to implement that. And with the ATS that we had at the time, it didn't work. I think it's something that we will go back to revisiting at some point, but we're really mindful and evaluating constantly the tools that we have. Are they working for us? And if they're not, we get rid of them. We've tried a couple of things, piloted a referral program to a relatively new company in Boston, and it just wasn't working for us. It didn't work the way we wanted it to. So after a couple of months, we, moved on and are not using it anymore. So it's just a constant question of, is this tool doing what we need it to? And is it working for us today?
Very nice. I like that. I'm an engineer from my background, so I love technology. And anytime a tool can replace something that I have to do manually, I get super excited about it. Are you guys managing the entire interview life cycle, or is there certain portions that you guys have kind of automated with the scheduling at this point?
We look for automation at every point, but the recruiters here on the team, they're all full cycle recruiters. So they manage the process from, opening the rec. We have an internal approval process using our ATS, and then working with the hiring manager on drafting the job description, talking about the ideal profile, posting it on, various sites. And then depending on the role, we may do some active sourcing. So we have a really smart AI sourcing tool that we use beyond just LinkedIn. And that has worked really well for us on critical roles. We do have a lot of great inbound candidates as well, but the sourcing has been, in particular, I would say, highly valuable for us.
Wow. I like it. A director of talent who's all into the tools, and then your testing, which I like a lot because I'm a big fan of what tool existed yesterday might be eclipsed in a month. And if that's a value add to the company, then you certainly have to, run the pilot, see if it works and roll it out. Cause I feel like there's a little competitive advantage we all can find in the initial tool before everyone finds it. And it just goes away after that.
The tools are really important, but I think at the end of the day, in terms of asking ourselves, where can we add the most value? One of the things that I think I'm really proud of that the team does is they're always resetting expectations in terms of where people are in the process. Those kind of sort of constant updates really help shape the candidate experience and the way someone feels about coming into your organization and interviewing. It can be very nerve-wracking. We think about how can we make that a really positive experience and show them how excited we are to have them on site. Because of all the work that we do up front, we only have a limited number of people who actually make it to the on-site stage. So if you make it to the on-site, you're one of our top candidates, we're really psyched to have you here. And we're going to show you that by spending time with you in person, both from the talent acquisition team, but also through the rest of the team members here at SessionM.
I think you mentioned employee experience. Were you referring to candidate experience with the on-site?
Yes, candidate experience.
So in terms of, I guess, your employees, I've talked to a few talent acquisition people, and I think it's interesting that each one has a different perspective on what the candidate experience is going to be and how they're going to prepare their team to make sure that everyone through the on-site's ready. How do you go through the team, I guess, in terms of maybe working with them, making sure managers understand that they are being judged through the interview process? Is that something you work with managers pretty closely?
We do. When we rolled out a brand new applicant tracking system this year, that was part of the training with the system, was to talk about how important it is, whether or not we hire the candidate, that we leave them with a positive experience. that employer branding is really important, and word of mouth, it gets out. So, we focus a lot on that training. And then when we open the position and we're sitting down with hiring managers, we make sure that we align on exactly what the interview process is going to be. We have a number of multi-incumbent roles, software engineers or project managers. And so those interview processes tend to generally be the same, but the same for that role, like software engineer or project manager. But we meet and really set out that plan for who's going to be involved. What is each interviewer's purpose in vetting these candidates, and making sure that that is communicated to the interviewer and everybody's on the same page.
And then, well, let me ask you this. What's the process? So after you go through the candidate on site, what is your process for making sure like you've captured all the right information and it's going to system? What does that process look for you guys?
Yeah, I would say it does vary a little bit, but generally we try to have some sort of a debrief either after the candidate's been on site or after we've had, our top 3 or 4 candidates on site. Depends on how long that takes. If it happens in a couple of days, then we'll just do it all, one wrap up. And sometimes it's live. Sometimes we do gather feedback directly through our ATS. And it's kind of circling back with the team on feedback or addressing any concerns, those types of things.
Do you guys experience, especially from the engineering managers, do you experience any latency and delays from their feedback going in? Because
Of course.
I'm hearing a common theme of trying to get them to enter their information as a challenge.
It's not just the engineers. It's not just the engineers. I would say that I think everybody across the organization is really busy, but they also know how important hiring is, and that ultimately that's going to help bring in new people to help solve our problems. So we do have sometimes ask or follow up, but it's not just the engineers.
I actually talk to recruiters and I held positions in companies where I was working as a hiring manager. I was working, in internal function, and HR people and talent acquisition people have a plethora of stuff to do. And then interviewing comes on top of the engineering or the hiring manager's responsibilities. And I'm like, there's so much more complexity because I think third party recruiters all think, I sent you a candidate, give me the feedback. Why is it not like, I want to know? And it's like, there's meetings that happen. There's fires, like there's stuff that's going on. This is not just for you to get your fee. So why don't you understand? So I think it's really interesting when you describe the process, because I think a lot of other people in your roles, I've heard similar things, but I think it's also good for the audience to kind of hear that there is a process. We cannot shortcut this process, and you guys run by this process. And it's like asking Starbucks to skip a step in the process of making a coffee. It's not going to come out the same. And I think that's where a lot of times we see it like, a disconnect, from my side of the world to your side of the world, for instance.
Yeah. And I think our team does a really great job of setting those expectations with the candidates so that they know, hey, we're not going to have a chance to circle up on this because XYZ is happening in our organization. We have a customer on site, or we just know that, maybe the hiring manager is on vacation. Like, we communicate that so they can know when to expect to hear from us. Is it going to be the same day? In most cases, probably not. But is it going to be that week? Is it going to be early the next week? Setting those expectations really does help drive a really good transparent communication, but it helps set those expectations and drive a good candidate experience.
Solid. So if you're setting those expectations with your candidates, obviously you want to make sure that they're fully aware. In terms of internally, I guess, working through your team, you got a team of 5 you're managing. How do you go about setting their personal, like let's say their monthly, their quarterly targets, their metrics they're hitting? Is there a process that you're following to make sure that that expectation, that obviously what they need to be doing on a day-to-day execution level?
Yes. So we go through and update the hiring plan pretty frequently. I would say it's very fluid. And so we're realigning the team on those metrics. We have a rule of 0 agencies. So far in 2019, we have not used a single agency, which we're really proud of. And then we have a number or a percentage, a metric that we're tracking on the number of roles that they have individually directly sourced. So, we have some hard to fill roles, of course, just like every other organization. And then we have, roles that we are either hard to fill or we really want to go after a specific type of person. And so we'll identify those as a role that we need to do sourcing for this role. And, the team knows, based on the 15 or so recs that they need to fill or roles that they need to fill, what percentage of those they need to have that are directly sourced.
Interesting. When you mentioned you're like, targeting, creating like the target person you're going after, are you actually going through and creating personas and defining attributes of the person that you'd like to see, or is that a step beyond?
I think that's a step beyond. I think that's coming in the future, but we aren't doing it today. We're really identifying, core skills or, types of experience that we're looking for in candidates. But I think most people are doing that on LinkedIn anyways.
No, that's interesting. So you mentioned like obviously they're working on their top priority. How are you as the manager of the team helping them to prioritize, right? Obviously you're getting communications from other managers and other business owners. How are you able to redirect without obviously causing like a 180 on a daily basis? How are you managing that from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just alignment across the organization. We have limited bandwidth given the size of the team and the number of recs that we're currently working on. And I think every person that has an open rec would say that they want that role yesterday. And so it's a bit of a balancing act in terms of sometimes certain roles take longer to fill. And then sometimes certain roles are higher priority than other roles. And so I think it's just communication across the organization to align on what the key, open recs are, what are the highest priorities, and then really making sure that we close those before we move on to the next round. And that's hard. Sometimes that's a hard discussion to have with a hiring manager that wants someone yesterday, but the team is really focused on a couple of other roles that we think are higher priority. And so we have to communicate out why they're higher priority and that, we're letting that pipeline build, but we aren't quite ready to go all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's always the tricky bit is to prioritize within resources, whether it's in talent or any part of the business. I think competing resources is always the challenge that exists. So you obviously are managing a team of 5. You saw the demand, you converted, I know the additional person on the team in the last year as well. So do you see, I guess, in terms of the balance of roles, is there like a tipping point in which you're going to go talk to your managers, whether I don't know who you report into, I didn't ask you, but is there a tipping point in which you need to then go make the business case that I need to have an additional hire on my team?
Yeah, I mean, I think every leader across the organization is doing this pretty frequently, evaluating the work and the capacity of the team, and then making the case, hey, here are the things that we could be doing, in addition to what we're currently doing, or hey, the rec load is going to increase significantly, so we need to have additional recruiters. I do want to call out that I have a talent acquisition team, but then I also have, a core HR, just one person right now, but one additional core HR person.
Okay, who manages just the HR functionality without having to worry about talent then?
Correct. Yeah. So she's really focused on onboarding and offboarding and, the people operations side.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I'm talking to more people, I'm realizing the dotted line from the actual talent to getting the budgets approved are different in each organization. And each time it represents a different challenge for, for somebody like, VP director of talents to make sure that they're acquiring the resource, making the budgetary requirements. And I find it interesting because sometimes I've noticed, and some of the discussions are after it's too late, people are going, well, let's make the hire. And it's like the VP of talent, director of talent said, I think we should hire someone as we're ramping up. And it's always seems like it was like a little bit of a delay. And oh, okay, you guys really need somebody. Let me get you somebody now. So I always find it interesting how each organization is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're in charge of, I guess, the oversight of the whole thing, employee relation, total rewards. I saw, and the one area that you were going to touch on, I think we wanted to get into is a little bit more of the employee side. So in terms of the talent acquisition piece, we acquire people, we bring them in. What happens for you guys to make sure that you're not losing people through attrition and they're staying on the team? Is there any particular things you guys do internally to optimize that at all?
Of course. And I have to say, it's not just the people and culture team. This is organizational wide. This is every leader across the organization. They should be thinking about these things all the time. And I don't know who the person is that said, you never leave necessarily a job or a company, but you leave a bad manager. And I think, therefore, we do a lot of different things. It starts with the candidate experience, and then it, bleeds into the onboarding experience, which we do through a lot of automation and tools again, because we're such a lean team. We want to make things as easy and as simple as possible. And then, coming into your first day, you've got a lot of things kind of taken care of and some paperwork done already. You're really meeting people within your individual team as well as your office. And then, learning about the product and about, all of our values and systems and all the things that we do, which are unique to SessionM. And then, beyond that sort of initial onboarding period, it's all about, continuous coaching and development. And in a fast moving business like this, it's happening sort of all day, all the time. But sometimes people forget that it's happening and that it's happening at such a rapid pace when you think, wow, remember where we were 6 months ago? That's not anywhere what we're doing now. So yeah, we have a ton of things that are going on within our organization to align on goals and sort of corporate vision and where we're going and, sort of development, communication that's happening across the organization. So I'm rambling and I don't know what my point is.
I think the onboarding process, and I think a lot of times from what I'm, talking to people, the managers themselves need some basis. And this has come up a couple times on Twitter, talking to people in talent acquisition. And it's like the managers themselves aren't necessarily born to manage, right? They're elite people, they move into management. And sometimes the gap between them being an amazing boss and not is the additional training and support for them. And sometimes that's lacking. I think as organizations like you guys have grown 80 headcount, there's people being promoted into roles that previously they never held. And we're all taught how to do our current job, but we're not quite prepared to do our next job sometimes. And I think, making sure that skill set's there, to me, I think managing is far harder than anyone ever tells you until you have to do it. And then you realize you're responsible for people. And that's a whole different ballgame.
It is. I've seen it in so many tech organizations that are growing really fast. You take your best individual contributor and you put them into a management role, and they suddenly think, oh my God, I have no idea what this means or how to do this. And, I think at SessionM, this is a focus for us in terms of, helping to support those people leaders who are either new or want to learn some new things about how to lead their teams. We've had a couple of newer leaders, I would say, or start in our organization, and it's been really exciting to see the way that they take care of their teams that's new, that I haven't seen before, in terms of just that constant care of feeding and making sure that you're really taking care of people and their needs. That's what it's about. And I think some people are just inherently really good at that, and others just, it's not that they're bad, they don't know how to do it. And so we have to kind of put in place a framework on how to accomplish that, and then they kind of make it their own.
Very cool. What do you guys do for fun at SessionM? Like maybe the team itself. I haven't asked this question, but what is it the team does for fun? Most everyone's focused on culture outside there, but specifically for your team, what do you guys do for fun to keep everyone light? Maybe it's a quarterly thing or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most teams meet pretty regularly, but we try to take some of those meetings outside or do something totally different. We've had a meeting in a restaurant recently where it was just like, hey, let's just table the standard thing and get out of doors and spend some time, talking about other things besides just work. We've, done lots of team dinners and activities and things like that. As a broader organization, there are so many things that are happening across SessionM, which are really fun to see. We've got a tennis tournament that just kind of spun up. I think this might be the second year that it's running. We had a group of people run the Tough Mudder earlier this year. We have a group playing beach volleyball. So all kinds of sports activities, but they're not necessarily like, I didn't dream up that this is what I wanted the team to do. It was like somebody came to me and said, hey, I want to get a group. And it seems like I've got 10 or 20 people interested in this. Hey, can SessionM support this in some way? We always try to make that happen.
Yeah, I think that's really cool so people come to you with the ideas. Are you guys actually pushing out, or is there enough coming in? There's enough employee engagement of bringing the ideas, bringing the interest, that's really where everything's bubbling up from?
No, it's a balance of both. I mean, we have a number of, corporate social activities that are sponsored. We do monthly new hire activities. We have a new hire ice cream social this week. We've gone out for drinks recently. We also have a monthly event that different teams host in the office. And this is really something that we started. It's called Impact Wednesdays. It's a night when the product team, as an example, last month, the team has to come up with either a theme or some snacks and beverages. And we sort of help facilitate that. And then once the team goes, they elect the next team to go. So we've played code names, we've played trivia, we've done, all kinds of different things. So it's been really a fun night.
I think sometimes coming up with the ideas seems harder. We're a small organization here. Sometimes I like it when somebody has a suggestion. I'm like, that could be what we do this month, because I tend to run out of ideas and I don't want to disappoint. So it's nice when ideas are coming at you, but you guys sound like a good balance.
Yeah, so we actually do have a fun committee that helps drive a lot of this.
Nice.
It's totally voluntary. You raise your hand. We've got a Slack channel and a monthly meeting where we talk about upcoming things that are already either on the calendar or already happening, and then what other things do we want to do.
Very cool. I like it. In terms of, I know we're talking about SessionM, and I guess I know you've had a few other places. I didn't want to neglect those, like, a Flywire maybe, or Core Security. Was there anything in particular that you guys were doing that was unique that you've carried over that you kind of saw as a good thing, or anything interesting that was happening at Flywire? Because I know that was a pretty big company, or got big.
Yeah, I would say that Flywire was incredibly unique because it was incredibly global. So over a very short period of time, I was helping to open offices in 8 or 9 different locations around the world. They're a global fintech payments company. And because of the global nature of their business and the people inside of it, I think they did a really great job of celebrating cultures all over the world. And, I think one of the biggest values that they had or that we had was, really this opportunity to travel internationally and experience firsthand other cultures. And so I think that a lot of the things that we were doing were focused on that. While I was there, we did an all company meeting down in St. Thomas. So we had 80 people at the time. We flew every single person across the entire globe to St. Thomas. We had a couple of days of meetings. We ran the business from there. And it was awesome. And then about a year and a half later, we did an all company meeting in Morocco. We had about 150 people. So me and a number of other team members were, focused on pulling this whole thing together and thinking about the security and about the connectivity and the activities and the conference content. And it was incredibly exciting and a little chaotic, but really fun.
Wow. Were you centrally hiring for all those global teams, or was there different?
Yeah, we were. We, again, I brought talent acquisition in-house, and from Boston, was able to source a lot of these. And some of these locations, I'll use China as an example, but we had our office here in Boston. We had a large office in Valencia, Spain, and we had someone who had spent a significant amount of time in China, and he kind of raised his hand and said, I'd be happy to go help open, the office in China. And so it was in a lot of these situations, when you're landing into a brand new place, you really start with the network of the person that's there. And then you have to kind of grow beyond that. But it's really hard when you're in this, big metropolis city and with millions of people. But some of the initial hires were people that this person either knew or just networked with or whatever. And it grew from that. And then the talent acquisition team here in Boston was augmenting and supporting that through job postings and interviewing and all that good stuff.
Wow. That sounds a challenge in of itself.
Yeah.
So flash back to SessionM. What's the rest of the year? I mean, as the year is rapidly closing, I mean, you guys are, 230. What's the year supposed to look like? Like, how many more people are you trying to add there?
So most of our growth is going to be in Prague. So we're looking at hiring another 12 or so people there. And then we have a couple of additional roles here in Boston. So, I think we'll be somewhere, 240, 250 people by the end of the year.
Very cool. And you're going to completely support the Prague office from Boston then?
Yeah. So, we have the talent acquisition person there. And then I'm actually in the process of looking for a local office manager who can help with a lot of the day-to-day support, as well as some HR administrative support on benefits and onboarding, offboarding, that type of thing.
Well, at least the time zone isn't too bad. I mean, it's there, but it could be worse if you're dealing with China Flywire. That's a massive gap in terms of hours. So Prague isn't too bad.
Yeah, here at SessionM, we actually do have an office in Singapore. We've got 7 or 8 people there. And the time challenge is real. It's hard. When you want to connect with someone or talk to someone, you have to remember all the time, oh gosh, it's the middle of their night. So if I send them a Slack, I don't want to bother their sleep. You just hope that they've got the Slack snooze set up appropriately so that you're not bothering them. But there's a lot of, because of that, either we're doing really early morning meetings or they're doing really late meetings. And I'm always surprised at how much these people are willing to give up those hours of their day to connect and move the ball forward, because it's a challenge. It's really hard.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, I didn't know you guys had a Singapore office too. So that's a whole different wrinkle of having to hire in a language and dialect. And you guys support that office from Boston then, I'm assuming it's a smaller team?
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, when you guys are adding to that team, I mean, just what are the challenges? Like maybe, I'm assuming language might not be a challenge.
In Singapore, everybody speaks English anyways. But, to be able to work here, you need to be able to speak English so that you can understand, sort of the organizational goals and where we're going and attend company meetings and participate on Slack. So there are many other languages that people speak here. I think we did a count recently and we have maybe 15 different nationalities worldwide, which is quite a few. So I'm not sure what the language count is, but it's got to be up there.
I honestly think you have a really cool company. You guys have fun. You have a global team opening offices in Prague. I mean, it certainly sounds like you got a lot of different challenges. You've definitely had to at least Flywire. It sounds like you kind of face similar things to kind of gain from and kind of extend what you're doing now. So I mean, I know you've only been at SessionM for a year and a half, but it's a lot of growth to have to manage in the 18 months you've been there. It's probably gone by like a flash.
It's gone by in a flash. It's been so much fun. I am never bored. Every day is got a new challenge and I get up really excited to work with the team and to, we're having fun and we're solving big things and it's a joy to come into work every day.
It does sound like a fun place. full disclosure, if we do have exposure to a client, I always like to make sure we mention this is a long time ago, I think a year or two ago before you got there, we were working with SessionM, but no direct correlation of having you on as a guest, just to clarify. And you don't work with agencies now. So yeah, I always like to make sure we cover that. So in terms of, I mean, you've got a fantastic body of experience to work from. Looking back on it, is there anything that advice-wise or anything that you wish somebody would have told you when you first started out in talent acquisition that you were like, man, I wish I knew this, piece of information?
I think the advice that I wish I had heard was don't be afraid to make a mistake. I think a lot of us want to be perfect and we think that every email and every message has to be exactly right. And sometimes just getting it done and getting it out the door and then iterating on it, improving is important. But, I think sometimes I get stuck in my own head or worry about it being exactly perfect or right.
You know what? That's so funny. I think that's the one thing I wish somebody would have told me when I was 10. Just growing up, you feel like, as you start maturing, you feel like it's all got to be right for it to be good. And then you start realizing that sometimes done is better than perfect. I love what you said. I wish, even with this podcast, I think I sat on this podcast thinking about it for 6 months to a year, and I was like, well, I want to have this perfect thing before I start. And then one day it was just like, I will be like in the ground 6 feet under if I don't just start, because I'm going to keep delaying. So I just ripped the Band-Aid off, said we're going to try it, we're going to give it a shot, and I think only good things come from sometimes taking those type of risks.
And if you go back and listen to your first podcast, do you think, oh, wow, that was really terrible? Or you're just really proud that you got it done and now you're continuing to grow on that?
I look back on it and I go, it just had less experience. So I think I actually listened. The first one I recorded was me just for 20 minutes talking because we didn't have a guest. And I just said, today's the day I start. So I hit the start button. I recorded. I was nervous. I was trying to sound a certain way. And then I think as you get comfortable, you just start becoming more yourself and you realize if I stutter, if I fumble, it's all good. We're all just humans trying to get through it. But I do actually look at it as it was all just like part of the repetition to get better at something. I used to play tennis and, I look at that as the same, like first day out versus the last day I was playing competitively. I look at it and go, it's just the experience that let me hone skills better. And yeah, we actually now do a daily 10-minute podcast. And we didn't know if we could pull that off. And I do that with my brother. And as the first two of those, we were really stiff and we were like, this is really difficult to get through. And then now we just turn the camera on, we record for 10 minutes and we don't even think twice about it. We get a lot more comfortable. So I think these are fun. I can see why people like listening to podcasts. I think there's a learning component to hearing how other people do something. I personally learned that way. So I think that's why they've become super popular.
Thinking back to the first couple of times that I had to do a phone interview or that I had to interview someone, I felt super insecure like most of us do on the first time we try something. And I thought, oh, I don't even know like what would be relevant to ask this person. And I'm sure, I was super stiff and probably visibly and audibly nervous. But over time, you get more and more comfortable in the questions that you're asking. And then you learn or you find out new techniques or new things to ask people or new angles. And I think that's been a really fun learning curve. I certainly have a certain style in the way that I interview and talk to people. But we were actually just training or talking to our intern about the first time that she was going to do a phone interview. And so we're all kind of weighing in with our techniques or the way that we approach the conversation. She had 2 back-to-backs. And, I think it was really exciting to sort of watch that learning experience for her and to see her sort of experience it firsthand.
I have a 6-year-old, so it seems like I witnessed that a lot. And sometimes I have to remind myself she's never done this before. She's never experienced this. And kind of watching the second, third time she goes through something, you're like, wow, it's just so fast. As humans, we learn so quickly. I mean, we're designed to just, nature, nurture argument, however way you sit on that side. But I think we're just designed to learn and use experience to get better. So I 100% agree with you.
It's fun to watch.
It goes by so fast. Everything seems like it goes by fast. I don't know what it is about the world, but the day, the week, children, everything seems to just go by like in a blur. And all we can do is kind of keep pace. That's my philosophy. Like it's going by. And I was going to ask you, I know I mentioned it before. I'm a big productivity nut. I'm always trying to find a better way to improve my day. So I'm starting to ask guests of what they particularly do to enhance their productivity, if there's anything. So I was going to just put that to you, if there's any productivity hack or any, anything you do that kind of helps you get through your day.
I do 2 things. One, I do live by my calendar. I try to put time in if I need to focus on a specific project or something that's more strategic, that's going to take a 90-minute block, I'll try to put that into my calendar. I also keep a notebook, a written hard notebook where I, kind of keep a running list of things that I need to go back to or need to get done. And then I guess the third thing is, sort of setting those daily intentions, walking in the door and knowing what I absolutely have to get done that day and what else can, either push to the next day, but like, what is the thing that has to get done now?
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think I use a similar approach. I tend to use a quadrant. I break down a quadrant. I kind of put my 4 areas of responsibility, and I try before I start my day. I do it at night to see where do I think I'm going to spend the most time. And I like to look at that at the end of the day and go, was I even close? And most of the time, obviously I'm guessing where I'm going to spend my time. I'm like, dang, I didn't accomplish that one sector. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, let's say business development for us on the recruiting side. I'm like, I got nothing of that done. Push that to the next day. And then I question myself, why is it not priority? So I'm always about, making sure the priorities are dialed in. But I do like the notebook. We talked about that before. I'm a electronic guy in every fashion, but when it comes to my tasks and notes, everything's on a piece of paper all around me. So I like that.
I like the checklist. I like to make sure that I've got everything captured, but then I can also check it off or cross it off when I've done something. That's a satisfying feeling.
Tons have been written about that feeling of paper versus I've tried electronic to-do lists. And to be honest with you, I could never stick. But as soon as I got that feeling of checking something off or crossing it off on a list, I was like, oh, it just feels like I actually accomplished something versus clicking the little, my Apple reminders, I click the little done sometimes for something. I'm like, all right, done.
I do use a lot of electronic lists for grocery shopping or keeping track of things at the household.
Yes.
That for me seems so much more mundane and less satisfying. Like it has to get done. So I'm okay with it being electronic, but if it's like really important, it's got to be written down.
I agree. Yeah. Stuff that's recurring. Like if we have bills or, or my shared grocery list with my wife, that stuff's all electronic because I feel like my phone will buzz if something happens. But the paper, for some reason, I feel like once I write it down, I'm mentally committing to whatever it is I'm writing that I think is important because I'm taking the time to write the whole thing out. So I don't know if there's a mental component to that, but I agree. I've got to write it down if it's for work. I can't otherwise follow it up.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I appreciate you being on. I think your background's fantastic. I think you've got great views on everything we touched about. I think we could probably talk forever, but I know you've probably got to get back to it.
Yes. Thank you.
And then just as a follow-up, so we will post in the show notes, hopefully a link to your LinkedIn. If somebody has a question, if somebody, wants to maybe follow up with you on something, is it okay if they reach out via LinkedIn or another platform?
Of course. Yeah, LinkedIn's great.
Awesome. So we will include that in the show notes. And then I appreciate your time being on this podcast. And we will be back next week with another guest. And in the meantime, leave us some feedback in terms of what you're thinking about the podcast. We really want to make sure if there's a question that pops up that you want answered from somebody else in the industry, we're doing that. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you.